Now, this is to put together a number of lessons that we've learned over the past 3 days, starting with the speech of the president of the Bar Association on Sunday about his intervention, for instance, in the northern part and south-south region of the country, where the NBA has done a lot in conjunction with some of its foreign partners in relation to security in our nation and how the rule of law can enhance this. He spoke about the appalling conditions of failing institutions, for instance, in Zamfara State, and how that is affecting society and the rule of law itself. He described his town hall meetings and the description of both rich and poor, rulers and ruled, about the view they take of law in society, the view they take of lawyers and of judges and administration of judges, to the orderliness, the peace, and the progress of those societies. And then we fast forward to what our president, the president of the nation himself said on Sunday, which has generated quite a lot of controversy about the place of rule of law and security, and whether this should be on a balance or whether one should trounce the other. In all probability, we would continue with our conversation this morning. And so you have that to think about, and truth of the matter is there are people who strongly believe, as I'm sure someone like Trump, that when it comes to what they consider as national security or what they consider as a threat to the nation, then everything should take back seat. They would say, for instance, that it's a threat to the existence of the country as a whole if you have no security, and therefore there cannot be any question of rule of law. And then you have other people who will tell you that there can't be any security because society itself sits on law, and that without any law, without any rule, then you have rule of men and you have anarchy. We're told that the law never ends up in arbitrariness if it is based on logic. And so these are some of the questions that we'll begin to interrogate this morning as we consider these major questions of transition that this conference is about, major questions of transformation that we hope through the Nigerian Bar Association we bring to bear on our society, and how we can build sustainable institutions. Which then takes me to what the president of Ghana, in his exchange with our own Emir of Kano, had to tell us on Monday. And remember, there are a number of perspectives that came into that. The Emir of Kano spoke about ecological problems as one of the factors that contribute to security. He spoke about eroding educational standards, about how that also affects security, and how this in itself leads to breakdown of law and order. And then we had the Ghana president tell us that for him, he thinks the main crisis is how we begin to look at education and how that will help us in these things we do. And when he speaks about education, although he was speaking about primary education and secondary education, remember our vice president yesterday then said, we, our lawyers, need to educate ourselves about the role we have in society. What is it that the lawyers should do as leaders? What is it that lawyers should do as those that drive the legal system, those that are responsible for administration of justice, those that are responsible for writing our Constitution and interpreting it and making our laws and implementing our laws? Because when you look at the landscape, it all boils down to what we as lawyers do. And so I then fast forward to the session on diversity and inclusion. And I then remember the secretaries among them who spoke about a number of things. And he spoke about young people and how there's a lot of insecurity that is breeding in our society because politicians in this transition period are beginning to spend money and give the youth money and encourage irresponsible behavior on the part of our youth, which he says he thinks will lead them to drugs, and that elections come, elections go, the youth are now hooked on drugs, and then other problems arise, and he says they then feed insecurity itself. So again, we need to begin to look at these things, whether it is just the rule of law that is responsible for breakdown of security, or that there are other factors that are responsible for this. Now, in taking this forward, again, we had a session yesterday on the black market of everything. And I promise you, all those of you who didn't attend that session, including our presidents, you missed quite a lot, because they talked about how we have a thriving, dark, alternative economy, they call it, not black economy. They talked about how you see a person selling roasted plantain. You know, our intervener then was Mr. Diabo. And he talked of a woman here in Abuja who sells roasted plantain and makes an average of over £1 million a month. But he says this is someone who is more or less an illiterate, doesn't know what BVN is, has no TIN, doesn't pay taxes, but pays tax to someone because this person operates in an illegal market, in other words, in a shack, and is paying some local government or state official or an area boy to stay there. And so they then interrogated the question of the relationship between law and this part of our economy that is not well captured. So I've tried to summarize some of the sessions that we've had over the past 3 days to set the tone for what we will be doing this morning. And so this morning, as I said, it's rule of law and security. On this panel will be none other than our own Prince. They call him Professor, but I rather call him Prince, Sulu Gambari. As he walks in, we welcome you, sir. Prince Sulu Gambari is exchanging pleasantries with one of his citizens from Ilorin. Many of us would know that Prince Sulu Gambari is also a professor and one of the most distinguished Nigerians that small mission. And she was so moved that she decided she'll be wedded to this nation, to its causes, to the rule of law, and ensuring there is good order, there is peace, and there is governance. Christy, you're most welcome. She is head of International Human Rights at Doughty Street Chambers, an international speaker, a trainer, and one of the greatest friends of the Nigerian Bar Association. You're most welcome. Those of you on social media would have been seeing tweets and WhatsApp messages from one of Nigeria's most outstanding human rights lawyers, one man who has done a lot in civil organization, who you think should be like the people he represents, but he's going to get up now and you see that although he's dressed like a communist, but remember that today communism is represented by oligarchs and billionaires. Femi Falana, please come up. So today, you know, you can see him. He's dressed like the billionaires from China. No, Mr. Falana. So anything he says today that suggests he's for the masses, do not believe him. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will get off straight away to our session. I have taken a lot of your time, and I apologize for that. I like to hear my voice, by the way. And so, without much ado, I would ask our lead speaker, Professor Sulu Gambari, to please, sir, give us your speech. If you don't mind, because I've taken your time, I'll ask you to do this in 15 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please, I crave your indulgence that this is the first time that I'm speaking in public, and I need to recognize and pay tribute to my friend, my boss, my brother Kofi Annan. Please, if you kindly rise up for a minute so that we can observe a minute of silence in honor of our late brother, friend, and late Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan. Thank you very much. Please have your seats. Distinguished delegates to this very important annual conference of the Nigerian Bar Association, thank you very much for inviting me, the organizers of the conference. And I was asking myself, what am I doing among so many distinguished lawyers? Since I'm not, I'm afraid, one of you in that sense. But I've been given a topic which is rule of law and security. And I believe that the relationship between the rule of law and security is very topical, especially given the sharp and divided reaction to President Buhari's statement right here earlier in this conference. I will come back to what the President said and my own interpretation of the intent, although, as most people here know, and with due respect all present, I'm not a lawyer. Nonetheless, I must say that my immediate and extended family have enough lawyers to fill the Nigerian Supreme Court twice over. I'm referring to the Gambaris, the Begores, the Saidu Kaus, and Mustafa Akambi, who are or are legal practitioners and judges. So because of that, some legal principles have rubbed off on me. So if you hear me make some reference to sections of the Constitution, some legal terms, it is from my being associated with members of my family who have served for so long in the judiciary and also who are distinguished legal practitioners. But nonetheless, this topic is a broader one because it's about the nexus between the rule of law and the society at large, and about the security of a state and of its people. So what is the rule of law? This is a concept that lacks universal accepted definition. The Oxford definition says, and I quote, "The restriction of the arbitrary exercise of power by subordinating it to well-defined and established laws." Coming nearer home, the Supreme Court of Nigeria, in the case of Military Governor of Lagos State versus Ojukwu, had this to say about the rule of law. The Nigerian Constitution is founded on the rule of law, the primary meaning of which is that everything must be done according to law. It means also that government should be conducted within the framework of recognized rules and principles, which restrict discretionary power, end of quotation. In a real sense, therefore, the Constitution is, as you lawyers like to say, the ground norm, or in the layman's language, the Constitution is the fundamental law of the land to which all other laws and governmental actions must conform. For me, again, as a non-lawyer, the rule of law finds expression in the first section of the 1999 Constitution, which reads, "This Constitution is supreme, and its provisions shall have binding force on all authorities and persons throughout the Federal Republic of Nigeria." So for me, the rule of law is a rule-based, this is my own interpretation as a non-lawyer, a rule-based government and society. A society and government that is based on rules. And in my view, there's no real alternative to the rule of law, especially in a constitutional democracy, which we now practice in this country. In fact, one might put it much more simply that the rule of law is the oil that lubricates the wheels of democratic governance, without which the wheels will eventually grind to a halt. In any case, I'm speaking again as a political scientist by training. I ask myself, what is the alternative to the rule of law? As Winston Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government except for any of the alternatives. The collapse of the Soviet Union and of totalitarian rule is a reminder of this axiom. So the rule of law, therefore, in my view, is the antidote to the state of nature, which the political philosopher John Hobbes once said in the book Leviathan, the state of nature is one in which human life will be nasty, brutish, and short. So the antidote to that state of nature is the rule of law. Nonetheless, it would be irresponsible to argue that justice must prevail, that individual rights must be respected, even if heavens fall, even if the society collapses, even if the nation state collapses. So the real questions in my view are whether and under what circumstances the rights of an individual can be suspended in order to, or groups can be suspended in order to save society and the state from collapse. To borrow the language of the US Constitution, where there's a clear and present danger to the very survival of the country. This is really where you talk about the suspension of the rule of law or the rights of the individual. So there's a dilemma between security and the rule of law. And I believe, again, drawing on my own experience as a retired diplomat, that this dilemma is recognized even in diplomatic practice, whereby it is increasingly recognized that the choice is not between justice and peace, particularly in conflict resolution or bringing peace to a country emerging from war or to end war. The choice is not between justice and peace, but how to sequence them. And if you look closer to our region in West Africa, you have the case of Liberia and Charles Taylor, where the choice is not between peace in Liberia and justice, but how to sequence. And we got the sequence right, because you had peace in Sierra Leone, and Charles Taylor is still being held accountable for some of the crimes that he has committed. So that is why I would like to proceed that it is in this context that I situate President Buhari's remarks. I am not a spokesman for the government of Nigeria, but I think as a citizen, I thought what I heard the president saying is to refer to a situation whereby peace and security of the nation are threatened and the respect of individual rights of those alleged to such peace and security may be abrogated or suspended. And what I saw in the president's remarks, and I hope the lawyers will agree with me, or at least standing, is his reference to judicial recognition. And I would also like to point out that the rule of law concept is not so simple as to ignore the fact that there will be from time to time tensions between the need to guarantee nationality and need to respect the fundamental rights of citizens. Again, where Section 33 of the Constitution of Nigeria guarantees the right to life, it permits the use of force as may be necessary to effect lawful arrest, even if such force leads to death. Section 45(1)(a), enactment of the laws of the Constitution, enactment of laws that derogate from rights to privacy from them in the interest of defense, public safety, and public order, but of course with a caveat within reasonable just commission as a member of independent eminent experts for the implementation of the Durban Declaration and program of action. And this body with the responsibility for the promotion and investigation of human rights abuses. And furthermore, I was happy to work with Madeleine Albright, the former U.S. Secretary of State and former ambassador to the United